inception in 2008, it's brought a diverse group of individuals that have been invited to campus to speak on topics that are relevant to the Georgia State University community. Today, we are very excited to host a moderated chat between Georgia State University's president, Dr. Mark Becker, and Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple Computer Incorporated. Questions in today's program were generated from Georgia State University students, faculty, and staff via our Facebook and Twitter. And following today's chat, we'd like to invite you to join us up in the speaker's auditorium for photo opportunities with Mr. Wozniak. Dr. Mark Becker began his tenure as the 7th president of Georgia State University on January 1st of 2009. Under Dr. Becker's leadership, Georgia State has overseen the launch of a variety of research initiatives focused on excellence among faculty and students. These initiatives, the cornerstone of which is the university's strategic plan, which was adopted in 2011, are aimed at positioning Georgia State University as a premier urban research university. I am honored to introduce and welcome our moderator for this afternoon, the president of Georgia State University, Dr. Mark Becker. A Silicon Valley icon and philanthropist for more than 30 years, Steve Wozniak has helped shape the computing industry with his design of Apple's first line of products. In 1976, the Steves, Wozniak and Jobs, founded Apple Computer Incorporated. With Wozniak's Apple I personal computer, and the following year, he introduced his Apple II personal computer, which was integral in launching the personal computer industry. He completed his degree in electrical engineering and computer science at the University of California in Berkeley. He has been awarded the National Medal of Technology by the President of the United States. It is the highest honor bestowed on America's leading innovators. He's also been inducted into the Inventors Hall of Fame, and he was also awarded the prestigious Heinz Award for Technology, the Economy, and Employment. Through the years, Wozniak has been involved in various business and philanthropic ventures. He currently serves as the chief scientist for Fusion.io and is a published author with the release of his New York Times bestselling autobiography, I Was, From Computer Geek to Cult Icon. His cult icon status has landed him appearances on ABC's Dancing with the Stars and on The Big Bang Theory. It is my pleasure to introduce and welcome the man who invented the computer that changed the world, computer geek and cult icon, Mr. Steve Wozniak.
Very much look into the lens of the music we were listening to. So what were you listening to that you were starting to design your circuit?
Well, listening to a lot of what's called classic rock now, but Bob Dylan stuff really struck me because I thought, how does a human brain put together these words, these combinations? It's sort of that element of poetry, because I wasn't really a literature major, and that's the closest thing to it. But it had content, it had direction, what was right, wrong, and how you should live your life. What's it kind of pointed out metaphorically what some wrongs in the world. And that's very important to me. And I grew up with, I was lucky in the 60s, the music we grew up with, it was an incredible time. And Steve Jobs and I would talk about that quite a bit. We'd go to all the little nearby universities and talk to record stores for bootleg. I don't know, some of them would be on yellow vinyl and orange vinyl and green vinyl. They were very strange, and they were stuff that wasn't put out by the studios.
That makes me feel a lot better, because I was listening to Dylan last night as I reviewed the questions that were submitted. So get close to the mark. What are you listening to today?
But you know what? Music's been such an important part of my life because it was part of the developmental phase. College years and really discovering it, one of those first concerts of your life. And sometimes a certain instrument hits you and it just changes your life forever. So to this day, my wife and I would love to go to about 50 concerts a year. Not the huge, big arena ones that everybody knows the names of. The little lesser known ones that you hear on certain esoteric channels on etc.
Somebody here is probably tweeting, so you want to give a shout out to any particular names?
Any particular band? Well, no, I mean, Airport Toxic Band, Old 97s, Reckless Kelly, like a little that country stuff. You know, I mean a lot. And Lana Del Rey, I'm telling you, she's a vocalist, got a lot of bad publicity in the States, very popular overseas, but she does her voice. And a lot of really smaller ones I mean, I don't know if they're the folk reading, you wouldn't know a lot of them. Ariana Gillis from Canada, and my favorite singer right now. She's more than just songs. A good singer is on stage, they're a presenter, and you're looking at the person. Whoa, I didn't know that little monster was in that body.
Music's a form of art, but it's I've read that you also consider the best engineering of the art. And many have said that your designs of the Apple I and the Apple II circuit boards were in fact manifestations of engineering as art. Talk about this. How do you see great engineering?
And they sometimes call me like a Da Vinci or something of computer design, but it was engineers at the time looking at the designs and judging them by their quality. Now, there's an area of the world that considers art and technology, that the modern technology helps artists create great art. Sculptures out of lights and, you know, a lot of this virtual world stuff too. But to me, the art was, I knew that the way I designed things were using methods in my head, never in any book. Couldn't be in a book. Everything I ever designed for Apple never came out of data sheets or looked at, only looked at the tiniest components. How can I connect these wires and do it myself, my way? Different ways than ever before. And I knew that great artists go through the same thing. Little tiny steps, little tiny strokes on a painting add up to the whole. And it's very, very different. Every little tiny part of it, aspect of any art, be it music composition, every little note is so critical that it be so, you know, so right, so perfect. You know, better than almost any other human being could do, and then you're a great artist. And I ran into a few people that were like that in my time at Apple, a few other engineers, but not very many. So about 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20. And they always cared to show you their code, why it was so perfect or contrite, you know, or elegant in some particular way. They really cared about it being good and not just being working.
Do you differentiate between design and engineering, or is it design where engineers express themselves?
I don't know. To me, I was called a design engineer. Even at Hewlett-Packard designing the handheld scientific calculators, and that was so my work of connecting chips, writing code, was called design too. I think design nowadays is taken to mean largely the overall look at the completed product, the thing that will pull out of a box, not the circuitry inside. And that sort of gets into the artistic area that I don't know. Maybe I could have been good at it, but I was always too afraid to ever try. So I think of myself as like the worst artist in the world, to try to draw something and make it look pretty. It'd be like stick figures. But boy, do I admire it. You know, it's like a song. You listen to it. You know by your own judging, it's good. When somebody else, you can't tell them, they have to hear it. Real art, you have to experience with your own senses. A real product is going to be great. You have to see it, you have to hold it in your hand, and you say, wow, there's something about it that gets to you. So, boy, I just admire it. It's very important to me, products that look better. And you know, as I grew up, before Apple even, Sony had that status in the world. Their products always looked a little better, a little sleeker, a little cleaner than the competition.
This is a stupid question. It says engineers are perfectionists. How do you reconcile perfectionism with real-world constraints like deadlines, other things?
Yeah, one of the things is to treat a company as though all of the workers, particularly engineers, are a major part of the company, that are involved in the future direction of the company. Their ideas can be espoused upwards. Ideas don't come only from the top down in big companies. I was very lucky to get this inspiration from working at Hewlett-Packard in an era when it was a different company. Hewlett-Packard only made instruments used by engineers. So every engineer at Hewlett-Packard was designing equipment for themselves. They knew what was good and what was bad. So giving that feeling that you're a part of the solution, and you have, once you buy into it, if you feel like you're part of a company, like, this is my family, this is where I get my income, this pays for my apartment, you know, you start to realize that the first goal, company does have to make a profit to be around, or it's not going to make future great products. Let's say you're at a company making something really great, maybe it's your own startup. The trouble is, if you don't make a profit, you're not going to be able to reinvest it to make something even better, to really take steps forward. So things like deadlines are important. It's a little disappointing though. As an engineer, sometimes if you're playing around with parts, you get an idea. Oh my gosh, here's how I could improve it by making a change. So companies should not make it difficult for engineers to get through quick changes after the project was totally defined in a 40-page document of every little aspect of code and hardware that would be in it. It's defined, and then the engineer has to stick to that and can't even add anything good. Those are bad things that happen sometimes, you know, just to get things controlled with management so that the company knows what's coming out when, and that's bad.
So was that easier to do with building products in the garage?
Well, I had an advantage. All of my stuff I did independently, single-handed, because I crossed a lot of disciplines. I grew up building things, ham radio, when I was 10 years old. So I would come up with ideas, I was thinking how I'd draw these chips on paper, and I'd gotten good over decades of life, you know, long time, getting better and better at techniques that weren't in any books. So I would design it. Then I would lay it out, solder all the chips in, decide where they go on a board so they're placed correctly, close to the right chip, solder the wires to their pins, hook it up, test it, I'd write the software, just all the jobs. I didn't have to go to somebody else. I also didn't have to say, I'll make my part good and they make their part good. I saw the whole picture, I made the whole picture good. And that really is what Steve Jobs spoke of in later years, as to what makes a great product. Really kind of one line that gets all the pieces working correctly together the way they should. Yeah.
Since you mentioned Steve and mentioned student questions, like Steve, like Bill Gates, at one point you dropped out of college. But unlike Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, you went back and finished. Why did you go back? Why did you go back to school for teaching degree?
Well, a lot of them dropped out of college to start a company, the biggest thing in life, you know. And me, I accidentally got offered. I took 1 year off after 2 years of college to earn a month for my third year of college because my ethical foundation said I should pay my own way, not borrow. And then, after my third year of college, I had to take another year off to earn the money for my fourth year of college. Got these incredible jobs, Hewlett-Packard designing the hottest iPhone 5 type product of its day, the handheld scientific calculator. And then all these ideas that came along in my head, you know, the ARPANET came about, building projects that led up to Apple. So I didn't get back to college for 10 years, but I didn't really drop out. I just pretended to take 1 year off. And I went back, just a little message that I tell my kids what school I went to. A little bit, I'm not into real strong rituals like a religion, my school, right or wrong, but I like to have a little bit of, you know, I got a connection to something. And school was so important in my life. I mean, I covered in your chair, educator's most important thing in the world. My dad taught me that, gave me such high education values. I told him when I was very young, I'm going to be an engineer first, but I'm going to be a fifth grade teacher second. This, you know, it's so important. Give us skills and foundations that really will lead to us having the money and income to have a home, a family, nice life, hobbies like cars and iPhones. Yeah. And engineers, of course, are part of that for me too.
But even before you were an engineer, you knew you wanted to be one early. You were a math. You really enjoyed mathematics. Was that something that just came to you? Were you inspired by a teacher?
I think it was accidental. And I'm going to go back. In my head, I remember very distinctly that I was just kind of didn't have any direction in life necessarily. And we were going to do flashcards of multiplication in third grade. And the night before, my mom did a bunch of flashcards in the kitchen with me, okay, up by the refrigerator. And I went to school, and oh my gosh, I had the answers. The teacher said that's the first time a boy beat the girls. And all of a sudden, I said, so you know, you get a little accidental praise when you're very young, and it starts making you think, oh my gosh, I'm good at something. If you get an A in a course, oh, I'm a good student, I'm going to study. Studying is important to me. So at least by accident or some reason, it became mathematics, became important to me. So I would wind up getting all the math awards from my schools. And I enjoyed it. But I also enjoyed mathematics for things like solving puzzles and riddles, you know, games of life. Entertainment's a big part of my life.
Well, you were also that fortunate accident that you and Steve Jobs got to know each other, became good friends. And you started this company that became known as Apple. And I think it's arguable and pretty defensible that Apple wouldn't have been what it was without the two Steves. Neither of you would have
More than that. Apple was very successful, made its marks in the world, made a company that could create the great products we have today, and lead the world into this computer in your hand status we have now. was making smartphones that just weren't going there like a computer in the hand. And thank God, there was a lot of bright people we started Apple with. We had a lot of professional, serious, older people. Steve and I were the two youngsters who didn't know anything about business. We never had a business course. We had no money in the bank. We had no relatives with bonus money. No, we were just in our young 20s and acting like people in their young 20s. But we got around some professionals that mentored us and brought us up. Steve took on the role of learning how to run every department in a company and sort of being at the top level decision. And me, I would only be an engineer. That's it. I didn't want to get into politics and, and criticizing people like that. Firing a person would be so hard for me.
So you and the other Steve haven't paired up. Do you think you ever would have started the company?
No, I would have had an effect, though, because the Apple I computer, I gave it away publicly. It's in the public domain. Apple doesn't own the design. I passed it out to a bunch of people that would meet in a social organization called the Homebrew Computer Club. And some of the academics were from Berkeley and Stanford, and they would talk about the future when people are going to be able to communicate with each other and be better educated and be able to solve problems with their own computer that the big company $1 million computers couldn't solve. And I love the little guy versus the big guy thing. And we talked about revolution. Microprocessors are going to lead to a revolution. The technology revolution would lead to the social revolution. I wanted that social revolution. Those people that believed in it to have something, so I gave away my design.
A lot of people just writing songs to spur you guys on.
Part of life for a lot of reasons, especially in those days. But Steve Jobs came down to the club from Oregon, and he actually saw the computer and said, "Oh my gosh!" He didn't even say, "Let's start a computer company." He said, "Let's start a company to build one little part of it, a PC board, so these people can assemble these. Build a PC board for $20, sell it for 40. Not even parts on it." So the idea wasn't even to start a computer company. It wasn't that far out. It's like, take any opportunity you can to get money. Steve would always do. Because that was the sixth time. No, that was the fifth time. The other one was the fifth time that I developed some product for my own little fun and entertainment at home. And then Steve came and saw it and said, "Oh, we can sell it." And we always did. We split the money. And we were a great partnership. And this was the first time we were going to have what's called a company. I was too scared to have a company because I could never run a company. I'm too young. And he said, "Well, for once in our life, two of us will, have our own company." We've done so many things together already, building technical products and selling them. Terminals to time-sharing outfits and breakout for Atari.
That brings us to one of the great student questions was tweeted in. What was the hardest or most difficult challenge you faced as an entrepreneur, not as an engineer, but as an entrepreneur?
It's really funny because I was not the businessman and I was the engineer. As an entrepreneur, what risks did I take? Well, sure, put in our first few $100 to form Apple. I had to sell my most valuable possession in the world, my HP 65 calculator. $500, but the next month we were going to introduce the HP 67, a better calculator, and my employee price would be $370. So not a huge risk. Steve just lived at home with his parents, even younger, and we didn't really need an income, so it's hard to even boil that down to taking a risk. Leaving Hewlett Packard was something I didn't want to do, but it wasn't a risk because we're starting with a finished product in Shell. Even before the Apple I shipped, we had the Apple II demonstrated.
So you're working at HP, but you're actually nights, weekends, all your waking moments, building product for Apple, designing product for Apple?
Oh yeah, when I went home, well, first of all, I was such a nerd coming out of high school and all this that in those days I had little chance of having a girlfriend for a while. So when I finished designing calculators at Hewlett Packard in the daytime, I went home, I watched Star Trek, I would have a TV dinner, and then I would get to work. Sometimes I'd go back to my cubicle at Hewlett Packard, and I would work on my own little projects. But I was so loyal to that company and loved them so much, I begged them to make the computer. 5 times they turned me down. But I would not do anything on the side of Hewlett Packard, and I would never have done anything that would have cost me my job with them.
So you started the revolution. Just how much of a revolution do you and Steve expect to create when you launch the Apple II?
Well, there were a lot of people starting to talk about this new technology, chip prices, memory, and microprocessors getting down to a range that people could own their own computer. Every single person in the world would have one someday. We talk these kind of big, outlandish phrases. But with Apple, we have leapfrogged the industry. We were just 2 years ahead of them. Nobody ever thought color would come to a computer. Figured out a way to do it for $1 instead of $1,000. I mean, it was such an incredible product that really we had very good confidence. And we didn't have money. We needed money to make 1,000 computers. So when we lived in the garage, what we did was we got the computers built in 30 days to pay, and then we sold them for cash at the store. That's how we did a few hundred computers of the Apple I. The Apple II, we had to raise money, and we found an angel. A guy who believed in us, came from the technology world, Intel chips, and he was looking around to spend his stock money, and invest in technology companies. He wanted to get involved in something. He felt these home computers were going to be real, and we're really going to go. The words we talked in those days were very strange compared to what computers do today. You wouldn't think that computer would have made any sense, but he financed us. He owned as much of the company as Steve Jobs and I did. He was older and a business experience. He was a mentor. He taught us what kind of people we had to hire, what their responsibilities would be, what Steve's responsibilities would be, what mine would be. Mike Markle is his name. So he ran marketing, and we were a marketing-driven company, unlike Philip Packard, which was engineering-driven. And he really, guided the company to the success that Apple was known for, but you hardly even hear about him because he wasn't a young guy coming from nowhere.
Well, since you mentioned angel investing, and you've actually been a serial entrepreneur. You give credit for Apple. It's not your only startup venture. Was it in your DNA? Was it in the water of the valley? How did it come to be that you became an entrepreneur, from engineer to entrepreneur, and then a serial entrepreneur? You've got the appetite for going for new technologies.
Yeah, I was not just engineer having gone through courses in the university. I was all my life designing things and hooking them together and building them. From simple little tone makers, on up to figuring out how to put out devices that put balls and paddles on a TV set of your own. A free input-output device. And so I just constantly built things for the fun. That was just my side note. There was no plan to be an entrepreneur. And, every great thing I built, even Apple II, I would have just given it away if I hadn't been talked into going to Apple.
So Steve convinced you to make money out of your hobbies?
So it would have influenced, these products would have influenced the world in their ways just as strongly, It's just that, you wouldn't have had centralized in Apple Computer necessarily, but my goal wasn't the money, it really was the great designs.
You mentioned iPhones, which is considered a great design. If you visit the Johnson Space Center in Houston, NASA's Mission Control Center, they tell you that all the computing power that was there to put a man on the moon was less than what's in an iPhone.
Of course.
Did you see that kind of a revolution in the Apple II?
That was very predictable by Moore's Law, and B, the sort of stuff that they have to launch on a satellite, well, it was sort of state of the art, state of its time, and led to the chips that we have today. But pretty quickly, as far as computing power, that was a very, very minor consideration. The high priority for space mission is reliability. And it had to be built, redundancy and a lot of things, so it wasn't like, comparing to other computers. But yeah, you're right, the amount of computing including is in a wristwatch today. And I would go down, I went down to Stanford Linear Accelerator Center sometimes because it was the state of the art for physics research in those days. And they had an IBM 360 Model 91, the largest computer in the world or one of them. And they had like 5 megabytes of RAM. Whatever this number. I would go and walk around the building. You could just walk into the building there on Sunday because wherever smart people work, they tend not to lock doors. So just touching machines or being near them and looking at them, oh my gosh, this was a big part of my life. Other people might be interested in, looking at guitars all the time.
So what about being a technology entrepreneur?
Technology entrepreneur is what's normally these days, most of the entrepreneurs we hear about are technology entrepreneurs. It's not really the case. Somebody might be an entrepreneur and find a better way to make a table or a backpack and, get going in that kind of operation. A lot of work figuring out how to do it, getting it made efficiently at low cost, overseas, whatever. But a lot of it, nowadays you think of, especially in Silicon Valley, it's technology. And a lot of times it's software and applications, the apps, all the mobile products. Every which way we live our life now involves an app to get things done. We feel, my gosh, what would I have done without that app? I would have probably just skipped it, or, the older methods are so much uglier, so there's an awful lot of room for a lot of young entrepreneurs. When we started with computers, we had an open computer, you could design boards that plug in, boards of hardware that might control a kind of a sensor of, of some chemistry readings or something like that. You might have other boards that had output that controlled little motors. And all these companies, high schoolers, college kids, were starting their own little companies. I saw 1,000 companies spring up of very young people who've never been in business before. I felt so good about that they had an avenue now, and and everything they built helps us sell our computers too. The computer was the platform. So that's where it is. My own son right now, he graduated in computer science, and he's worked for NASA for a long time. Thank God he quit NASA. It's the same thing, the work to do there, and all this exciting stuff is going on with the mobile apps. So now he's writing mobile apps, so he's doing that for a bunch of companies.
Okay, so there's hundreds of students out there. Wager that at least a few of them would like to start. What advice do you have for young people starting a company?
Number one, it takes a mix of disciplines. You really have to have some business people that have been through it before, some older mentor. You've got to have some people that are interested in taking the role of making sure that all the parts of your little company might just be, 2 engineers and some software, hardware here. It might be a couple of business deals out there, business development. So one person has to head it. You've got to worry about, your partnerships. How are you going to sell what you got done? How are you going to reach the public and people with it? Yeah, sometimes we're lucky. Apple II, the word just spread around the world, and Facebook, the word just, spread on its own. You don't need a huge publicity budget. Marketing is ever important. You've got to understand the end user. It doesn't matter what you are skilled at designing and writing your code. It's got to be, what's the end user going to feel about it? Are they going to say, oh my God, this is scrappy. Just what I want. It works the way I want. The buttons are where I want. They're the size I want and the color. You have to think about these. And marketing understands who it's really for and what we should build at what price. Very important, even if you're the engineer. But if you're a businessman, writing a business plan to raise some money from all the venture capital, do not try to do it without the engineer being a part of defining what the product's going to be. And secondly, if you have a working model or even a virtual demonstration of it, that is so important, because when you raise money, which you'll have to do at some point, you will own a lot more of your company if you develop the product further along. If you barely got started, you took venture money, and you get diluted down with having to raise more money, you look down in another round, you kind of just wind up owning very little of what really could be your own. So go as far as you can on very little money. And it's okay to take a job with a company doing any stupid, dumb job that just pays your living while you're working on your own things. When you're young, you can do that. After you get older to a certain age, you really can't do that. When you're young, you've got the time. Why do you think all these companies like Apple and Google and Facebook and Twitter, they come from such young people? They didn't really come from established business companies. Apple's kind of the exception with the iPhone.
But it was a company well before the iPhone in the mid-90s. It was a company on the edge. It was almost out of business. So,
well, Apple had some tough times. We had the huge success of the Apple II. And then we had the Apple III, failed. Then we had the Lisa computer, early GUI computer, failed, too expensive. Then we had the Macintosh, not enough computer for the price, very cheap computer, failed, totally failed. We had to work for years to build the Macintosh because that was going to be the future, but by then we owned a very small amount of the world's market. However, from day one, we had a principle. When you grow a company, you are going to run out of money. You're going to eat up a lot of money. We priced things very high and at a high profit margin so that we would be able to be self-sufficient very soon. And actually, within 6 months, we were. So that's a good feeling, because then you're really in control of what you're going to, the decisions that are going to bring things to the world.
I mentioned to you over lunch, my first Apple computer was a 2SI. So this was back about 1990. Mac 2SI, and then Mac 2CI, Mac products ever since. I had to go through a very difficult period when my son was in junior high school. He came home and he implored me to get a Windows PC because the kids were making fun of him. And I said, it's okay, they'll figure it out. This computer's actually fun to use. Those other things, they're a pain. You guys believed in what you were doing, and you had this vision and this mission to solve it.
Now we went down to Xerox PARC, and we saw their operation of a computer with a mouse, windows popping up. Yeah, it's impressive, and it's expensive stuff. We're the company that will figure out how to make it affordable. You would not believe how much work and research we did not to copy anything, to put equipment in front of people who've never used any computer in their life, and figure out what it took in terms of menus, words, sizes of things, icons, where things were positioned. What it took for somebody to walk up that knew nothing about a computer and be able to get used to it. We didn't want computers to be for only computer experts. And that really gave Apple its culture to this day. Making the computers easy.
So you didn't like reading manuals, or you didn't like writing manuals?
Well, Jeff Rasmussen, the guy that brought this philosophy to Steve and I. And he said the shorter you can make the manual, the better it is. You can make two products that can do just as much computation, and yet one of them, by the software that you work and put into it, can work so easy that anybody can use it. And the other one, only experts. They have to go through a training course. We should modify our human mind to learn how to use technology. Really, technology should put the work into the technology to make it work more the way that we are used to. I mean, now we got a touch screen. You touch something and you move it. Right? You know, just like a human does. I mean, humans got human versus technology. And Apple's been the leader saying that humans should be more important. Doesn't mean everything we do the absolute best in terms of, ease and user interface, but we're the leader for that.
Clearly, you've been credited as the differentiator has been the interface, the human interface with machine and Apple. Did you and Steve start out with that as a design philosophy, or was there an aha moment when you realized that was your niche, that was your way to differentiate yourself? Remember back to the 80s, and there's a whole bunch of computer companies that none of these people have ever heard of who were selling a lot more machines than you were back then.
Until we spoke to Jeff Rasmussen in extremely early years, we had never thought that way, we never talked that way. Just how can you make computer machinery have something to sell like other people sell things? And the Apple I had shown the world the formula. Basically, every computer before the Apple I had ugly front panels with weird switches you wouldn't dare touch unless you were highly trained. And ever since the Apple I, every computer had a keyboard and a video display. That was the formula. And the number of chips that made it work was affordable. The Apple II, though, was the real computer that kicked things off. And Steve and I we just knew we had it was like a typewriter. You could type numbers in and colors would pop up on our TV set. We just felt it was, wow, this is an incredible and powerful product. But we didn't think in terms of, although it was so much more human. I mean, the book colors, the book graphics, have games. We had game paddles built into the Apple II. These are human things. But we didn't think of it necessarily in those terms, only that we were ahead of the others and pushing it that way.
Okay, so we talked about the success of Apple, but one of our students wants to know, Steve Wozniak, what is your main ingredient of success?
I myself, I was just extremely talented and skilled at computers. But I had a little bit I didn't have real strong emotional swings either direction. And I would work so hard on projects. When I was young, I built devices like ham radios that took weeks to build. I built in elementary school science fair projects with hundreds of parts soldered into big boards. I mean, projects are not simple, they're not quick. And you work them, you work them, you work them. You plan them very well. Do all good planning in advance. And try to plan it in ways that it will take fewer parts, more elegant designs. It takes a while to learn these things in life. Like learning how to write code much more eloquently or with fewer characters than before. And design it just so well. And then when you build it actually kind of fast. But it's nothing's overnight. Yeah.
And it's not linear, so was there a major setback somewhere along the way where you doubted that this might work, say the Apple II, or?
No. It sounds very strange, and it's probably not the normal story, but in my mind, every single thing that I saw instantly popped in my head as a way to build technology. I saw a pawn game in a bowling alley. I said, oh my God, I have a television at home, I can build one of these. Built it with $1 chips. And then did a super low chip count design for a car for breakdown. I saw a terminal talking to the ARPANET. 10 colleges in the United States all linked together. Wow, that's power. Went home, just designed something to put words on my TV set. I mean, I never once tapped anything that I knew I couldn't really do. There was a part of my floppy disk design that, oh my gosh, once I got it writing ones and zeros on a little floppy disk to store data, I thought, okay, I can read them all back, but I don't know where the bytes start and stop. How do you figure it out if they're all ones and zeros? And I didn't think I'd solve it. I was really worried. I came up with a way. You know, I've never worked with disk drives or disk operating systems or anything, so it was all brand new. So sometimes you're scared you aren't going to get past an obstacle, and you do. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you think I'm trying something impossible, and you don't succeed. I've had cases like that in later life.
So the benefits of the non-radiators, you tell them what
The ARPANET was the forerunner and the inspiration for today's internet. DARPA, the defense industry of the United States, advanced research projects, they set up to link a few universities together, 5 at first, 4 or 5, Utah, MIT, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara. They linked them up, and then it grew to about 10 by the time I discovered it. And you could basically, they just linked up and said, now can we communicate? And we sent a message back and forth. Now can we put a file here and have somebody over there get that file? You know, and FTP was formed, and Ray Thompson came up with the app signed for some email protocols. Little things happened. And I discovered it. I just had to build a device that called a phone number over at Stanford, got me on the ARPANET, and I could bring up a list of computers around the country. And I could type 8, and I would get, Stanford. Or I could type 9, I'd get MIT, and then I could log in as a guest and read files. Wow. I mean, that was way before today's internet. Before Apple even.
I'd like to add, because like you, I experienced the ARPANET in the late 70s and was working in a government research institution. And we already had hackers. So you say you saw things, you saw answers. Were you ever tempted to go down that road?
Yeah, I think as a young person, always wanted to figure out how the system, what the command was looking for, never did it. Never once attacked the computers, stole files, took anything over. The closest I did was, I got passwords 3 times. One time it was a famous phone freak named Captain Crunch, and he was typing on my little terminal that got onto the ARPANET, and he was calling a local timeshare company with it. And I looked down and I saw kind of he only pressed 4 keys with one hand, on this phone. And I went down to the timeshare company, and I started guessing, and the second word I guessed was W-E-R-E. That was his password. So I saw his resume in there, and I was going to put him down the bottom of his prison time. But I didn't do it. I didn't do it, but I'll tell you, that little ARPANET, that little terminal, is what, by adding my own microprocessor and dynamic memory, turned it into the Apple I. It was just a quick modification to make it a complete computer, so I didn't have to call other computers. No, lifetime goal. I told my dad in high school, I'm going to own one of these 4K computers someday. Because with 4K, you could write programs in a higher level language. 4K Nova. And he said, how are you going to do that? It costs as much as a house. And I was sort of stunned. I said, oh, I'm going to live in an apartment. But there were a number of us who were going to have our own computer if we ever could. Boy, and I had luckily the skills to do it, too.
Many of us that grew up with that revolution at some point imagined probably they would make one like this. And for me, it turned out to be early Mac OS just after 2000. They were called something different, the titanium alloys. By the time that arrived, I could no longer imagine things that were obvious to come. Are you still imagining computing devices that are yet to appear on the market?
I am a little, but not in the same way as... I found that when I was working at Apple, if I predicted what was going to be in computers the next year, I was right that we were building it. And if I ever predicted 2 years out, just 2 years out, totally wrong. Somebody new would come up with a different kind of program, and everybody would want to go that way instead of the way they had been going. And things would switch around. So hard to predict out to the future what it's really going to turn out to be.
Well,
I just look at the best of what I have, and what are the improvements I would like, and more than anything else, of course, I just like understanding me. I don't have to think, I just have to speak. I love it. And the more and more, I love every little thing that I can speak to an iPhone, or that's what I try first.
Are you and Siri good friends?
Siri and I are good friends. Android and I are pretty good friends on occasion. Siri fails at. But now Google, right on the iPhone, put in their little voice system, and so I've kind of got it in one product now. Because Google's open. Yeah. So I like speaking because the first day I got the Newton message pad. Maybe none of you have heard of the Newton message pad. Maybe you have. It was the world's first PDA, a handheld computing device. And it was from Apple. And you could handwrite with your own handwriting. I took notes and lectures with it, went home, plugged it in my printer, and it printed it all. Incredible simple little device. Eventually got onto the internet, and the first day I got my Newton, I was in the San Francisco airport flying my kids to Orlando for Disney World. I got a phone call. So I wrote a note on the notepad to myself, just a note. Sarah, dentist, Tuesday, 2 p.m. I saw a button called Assist, and I thought it was some kind of menu. I clicked Assist. It opened up the calendar. It put in a Tuesday at 2 p.m. the note dentist, and it grabbed Sarah out of my contact list. And I said, I wrote the note for me, a human, and it understood me. My life changed that day. From then on, that's what I want computers to be. I want them to understand me in human terms. And eventually I want my little machine that has a lot of human senses like touch and motion and hearing and seeing. I want it to be my best friend that knows my heart and soul better than anyone. Well, it's not my wife.
So our budding entrepreneurs out there want to know, what are the emerging technologies of today that you see fundamentally shaping the future of the way that Apple One and Two?
Voice recognition and understanding what is really meant by sentences of words and language, natural language recognition, and also computers approaching consciousness, becoming brains. That's a lot further off. Ray Kurzweil is one of the leaders in that area, and I used to think that will never happen. The brain works so differently than any computer, and we don't know how it works. We'll never be able to do that. Computers can do the job, but a brain has to figure out how to do it. Now, I think computers can figure out how to do it, and not too far off. We just about have cars driving themselves too.
Do you follow Watson? Have you project?
Yes, but Watson, the way it looks is the image of what a computer could be like, a conscious computer, but it's really a tightly programmed environment. It's not as much as it seems to be. But what it suggests to us is absolutely, that's the track we're on, is what we see and what we sense, just like science fiction of the old days. And more people are starting to talk about this, computers becoming real brains, and they're going to need to get the information on the internet of the world. I'm convinced of that. But you used to ask a smart person a question. That was a brain thing. Now what do you ask? It starts with G up. God. So now we didn't design the internet to be a brain. We didn't design it to replace a brain. It wound up doing it by the way that it grew. So I think a lot of the consciousness is going to come about by accidental discoveries without knowing how it's done.
One of our computer scientists out there thinking about that future, and you were educated as a computer engineer, but you mentioned your son's a computer scientist. So one of our computer science majors wants to know, what is your opinion of the current state of computer science degree programs? And are there changes to the standard curriculum?
Yeah, I'm bad to answer this because I don't remember the current state of computer science degree programs. I know I love, it's kind of like, the difficult math of analog engineering, that you have to learn to apply and develop your data structure and all that. I think, I'm hoping that computer science, that the architecture of computers changes in sort of the next decade to incorporate low-cost NAND flash technology for its replacements. It's non-volatile like hard disks, and yet it's fast like RAM. And I think what we can do is, right now, we had a huge database. You have to store it on a hard disk. But now we're getting down to the point you have a huge database totally stored in NAND flash RAM. You know what? You don't need storage commands anymore. You don't need disk commands. You don't just save it there. You just work with that NAND flash as its memory. There are ways that are coming that works as memory. Just have all your trees and your structures out there right in memory, fully accessible all the time. A whole different programming world. Different operating systems, different programming languages. As far as the status of computer science right now, I don't know. I have to guess that it's good.
I was told in 1980 not to the computer science was that machines would be writing the programs and creating jobs.
Well, obviously not yet.
Not
yet.
35 years later, not yet.
No, if you try to do a bunch of projects for your own personal life, you wind up trying to make them so special. They aren't for a company, they're not to sell, they're just to make something beautiful in my own life. You develop skills that are so good, it puts you up the cream of the crop if any company wants you based on those skills. I do recommend doing a lot of that stuff. I also recommend that companies and startups have a way of helping employees have access to parts and tools to do a few things that are just for their own homes, just for their own interest, that don't have anything to do with the company's projects. Help them because they're developing their minds and their abilities to do great things, and it's cheaper in some ways than university education. Once they're spoiled.
Somebody
It
out there,
was about 4 years of your life, you can't say it.
one of our students out there thinking about having these skills and thinking about how to monetize them is asking the question, what are your opinions, if you have opinions, about super generalized software patents? What should be done to address those concerns?
Become a big issue lately, software patents. They did start a long time ago. They started back even around the age of the Apple II computer. They were talking about how software patents would be handled. Now it's kind of like such vague terms. It's always a gray area. Is it something that's so obvious to everybody? You've got so many patents that just seem so not really valuable. It didn't take a really great mind to think of it. You know, any little 2-year-old with a pencil would come up with it almost. And that's a great problem, because sometimes the patents are used to inhibit innovation. I think that young people who are going to go out and start their careers and their lives with a project think of new different things that never existed before. Not just crank the money machine and build the same thing that they've been building all along. The new innovators should not be far. And however, there is some room for patents. I think we would agree, because we develop stuff, and sometimes you come up with something very, very clever. And yeah, there is some room for patents. I don't think a patent should go forever. And software patents, I can even understand why software should be included as well. Just the general sloppy ones, I wish the whole patent department just could make earlier decisions. What they do now is they award a patent, and if it ever comes up to an issue, it goes to court. The court decides if the patent is worth anything. I wish they did a better job of deciding how much it's worth in for the issue.
Maybe you could come up with an
It's just people, it's not an algorithm.
Well, we're going to turn back in the last few minutes to entertainment. Before we do, we've got a question from the students. It says, if you could give only one piece of advice, what would it be? Inquiring minds want to know.
Usually I can only look at my own life. Believe in yourself. You don't have to win arguments. You don't have to prove to somebody else that you're right. If you believe you're right, everybody will say, no, it's not done this way. You'll never make money at it. But you believe in it. That's what matters. You know, you got to follow what's in your heart. The second piece of advice is how far you go in life is usually, I was taught this when I was young, and I believe it. It's how well liked you are by the people you work with. That will determine how far you go up organization, ladders and the like. So be nice to people. Don't be cutting them down. Don't be rude and all that stuff. It's just my philosophy.
Small down as you could believe in yourself.
Yeah.
So we're going to dance, if you will, no pun intended here. Dancing with the Stars. Tell us about it. How did it happen? How did you like it?
Okay, I don't watch television. Got a phone call from my assistant, and she said, Dancing with the Stars. I don't know what it is. What's that? And they got the wrong person. They obviously are way off the mark. I mean, I don't even dance at a wedding. And so over here, they're real nice. The producers believe in what they're doing. That got to me. And they're nice people. And turn them down a second time. Some friend talked me into it. He said, the show needs somebody like you. I thought, okay, I'll do it. I didn't realize that friend had never seen the show either. The most fun, it was very harrowing at first, actually very scary. So difficult. 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, so much pain you can't feel a broken bone from your toes to your hips. That's a lot of work, a lot of sweat, and that makes things worth it in the end. I was scared a week before that I'd go on TV and that looked so bad, I wouldn't be able to do it. And then it kind of came. And after you learn the first dance is the hard one, then you learn how to learn. And I applied that to everything you learn in university too. One of the things you've done is you learn how to get through projects by the time you're out of university. You don't apply necessarily knowledge that you got in your courses. You apply the techniques of learning and developing things. So I came and it was the most fun, happy thing in my life. I became so bonded to everybody there, so close to them, because when you're frightened to death, you bond. And I'll tell you, I actually did a very, very nice thing. I mean, nobody else ever done it. I thought it was common. I got this idea, everybody's going to leave little gift bags for everyone else. So I drove around to a whole bunch of bookstores, finding books that were simple joke books, little tidbits about the world, little factoids about the world, different books. And I put them in here, and I put in some sheets of some funny $2 bills that I made, and some metal business cards, and a little dumb letter, you know, hey, this has been a great experience. And then I hand wrote for each of the 27 people I did it for, hand wrote a full-page note why they were good people. That was, from my trailer, something along the lines that would lead you to think the producers were liars. Those producers showed up in my trailer, you're calling us liars. I wrote it, they're as honest as the biggest blue.
Well, you said you don't watch TV. At least one student out there is hoping that you watch movies, because they'd like to know what you think of the movie Jaws.
I have not seen the movie Jaws. Can't comment on it. I've seen one little clip, and the clip was way off the mark. Before the movie was produced, I saw a script early on. I don't even know if I was allowed to have it, so now I had it. And it was so awful and atrocious, and unlike the way Steve and I really dealt with each other, I didn't want to have much to do with that movie. So, but I'm looking forward to the one by Aaron Sorkin. He's writing it for some very incredible. He's already talked about it. It's going to be 3 1.5-hour real-time events. Introduction of the Macintosh, introduction of the Next, introduction of the iPod. 3 scenes real time. So we'll have people like me backstage talking to Jobs, and him giving his, show his type of thinking. I guess that's how it's going to be. Very creative, very different type of movie. And they're putting big money into it, about $200 million at the box office. Great movie. Big money movie.
All of them. So
But the first movie, I think, if it's anything like Pirates of the Valley, wow, that's going to be so popular. Because that's, it's the fun stories when we were young, just like the socialness. That's how I think.
Well, you've demonstrated with your last couple of answers your penchant, your passion for pranks. You're an inveterate prankster.
Yeah, I was my whole life. And I got caught so many times in middle school that I knew how not to get caught. And they would, the deans would go through pages and pages of things that happened that they knew Wozniak did these. And half of them I had. But they couldn't catch me.
The ones you did, or the ones better than yours that you did your credit?
No, there were, I don't want credit. Some of the better ones, I did get caught for one of them, and I was kind of proud of it.
So is there an ultimate prank? Have you pulled the ultimate prank? Is there a favorite?
I put a lot of money and time, like a ton of time, into some pranks, and to this day, because I have it, and I don't think there's one favorite, but there's some pretty good ones.
You're going to share publicly?
I'll share what I've never shared, sure. Yeah, so I see some tickets at Golden State Warriors, and sitting behind this one guy, and he's always going out to the club and looking at some lady who's kind of well endowed. And I'm just playing my Game Boy during halftime, so I'm not worried. And one time I saw this one lady down on the court, sitting on the court, kind of well endowed. I said, hey, look at her. And said, that's the one I go after. I go to and smell her. He always likes to smell her. So, okay, a week later, my book co-author introduced me to somebody she was working with, David Gordon, who did AskJeeves.com. And he came up and I said, oh, you said the basketball games. I see you down there because that's my wife. I said, is she into pranks? We worked out different types of bets or different types of, let's say, activities with her that I could come back and prove. He would win or lose the bet, but I get first with that. So, my friend and I went to Victoria's Secret and bought some panties. We got them scented with perfume. Having my pockets one night, all set up with David and his wife to go down and do this thing. And a guy in front of me bets. We finally got him to bet them on some big money. And I go down and I'm discussing it with them, and I give them the pants. I say, you don't have to give them back, but if I can say that they're yours, give them back. So I come back up to the seats, and I pull them out. He had made the bet. He said, the bet is to get her panties. Okay. I mean, this was a setup. I pull them out, and he's just a little fawn because they're not hurt out. He's a person never gets. So I said, you know, I've got some video that I need converted to digital. I've got a movie I want converted. So how much would it cost? He says, he owed me, you know, still $50. I said, $50. Good. So I went out in front of everybody there, and I pulled out the movie, The Sting. So good.
How did the passion for Tetris come about?
Passion for Tetris, accidental. I like early games of Nintendo's, and then my kids got better than me and got me up on it all. The Game Boy was introduced in the United States, the first handheld little video game, play game in the United States, and it was introduced with Tetris. Monochrome, not colored, no big screen. And I started playing it, didn't understand it. My kid will give me a couple of clues, and I got good. I started getting better with my friends, and better, and learned a technique here and there. And then all of a sudden, I was sending my scores into Nintendo Power magazine. They always put me top score by far in the country. And the next month, I'd still have the top score. And then they said, we aren't going to print your name anymore. We want newcomers on the list. So I spelled my name backwards. Steve was Evans, and Wozniak was Keynes out. And instead of putting my city Los Gatos, I put the next city over, Saratoga, California. And the next month, the magazine came out. I flipped to the pages, and I saw a top score. I forgot I'd done it. And I said, that's a foreigner. He lives in the next city over. And yeah, one time I got to go out and play Tetris on the 14-story science library at Brown University. The windows would light up. It took like an hour to carry a big Christmas tree light arrangement to each window. And one master computer kind of ran the game, and then there were boards 4x4 to turn on and off these control windows. Wow, across the street you could actually play it. Wow. I mean, great thinking. The guy who did it went to work at Apple, but he didn't seem to be a